Hello, welcome to my compound life. I'm your host, Jonathan. Thanks for watching my video. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about Bitcoin again. Right, so welcome. Thanks for watching. Before you do anything else, any chance, just hit the like, hit subscribe, and catch more of my video. I do try and post more consistently, and I promise what I'll produce more and better quality content moving forward, right? So I'll definitely need every one of your support. So just help me out, hit the like, hit subscribe, and that will definitely help me out a lot. Okay, so I'm a small content creator, trying to talk passionately about items that I think are very, very important for you and I and our daily lives, right? Especially when it comes to investment, personal finance, and I'll give you some tips, my shortcut in terms of how I can get to where I am today, right? So today's video, I want to talk a little bit about Bitcoin and why you should really be a bull and bear when it comes to Bitcoin. Okay, so you shouldn't just be a Bitcoin bull, you should actually be both, right? So my FYI, my type of investment, my trading, I simply just buy and hold. Sometimes we call them HODL in Bitcoin and crypto term. I don't do leverage. Sometimes I do, but for these specific channels, right? My compound life, let's not talk about leverage trading and so forth, right? Let's just talk about spot buying, HODL mode, because essentially because of this, it helped me to get out of the rat race. It helped me to get to where I am today. It helped me to become financially free, right? And of course, my investment isn't just on Bitcoin. It's actually span across properties, span across stocks and shares, ISA, ETF, and so forth, right? But Bitcoin and crypto, well, let's just talk about Bitcoin for now. And Bitcoin, it certainly helped me a lot to get to where I am today, right? Helped me a lot to pay off my mortgages and so forth, right? So we're going to talk about why you should become a bull and bear at the same time for Bitcoin, right? When I talk about bear, I don't talk about shorting the bear market, right? I just want to quickly highlight how I get through my Bitcoin HODL mode, right? So the reason I want to say we should be a bull when it comes to Bitcoin, especially now, maybe you're watching a Bitcoin video like my video, right, or crypto video, you are in a bear mode, right? Essentially, markets in turmoil. Bitcoin dropped tremendously from previous all-time high of 126,000 US dollars now to about 91,000 US dollars. It doesn't seem like there's a bottom for Bitcoin, right? So this is the time where you and I, if we have longer term for Bitcoin asset as a conviction, should really be a bull right now. This is our opportunity to accumulate the low, right? But on top of that, because you're gonna live a lifestyle where you need money every now and then. You need to cash out, you need to liquidate, right? Every now and then. So that's whenever Bitcoin peaks, you need to be a little bit of become a little bit bearish, because you totally understand that, for a specific asset, it's not going to continuously go up forever, right? It will have pullbacks. It will reach its all-time high. And for our instance, since we kind of HODL Bitcoin as a strategy, as a very key strategy, you want to be bearish towards the end of a Bitcoin cycle, right? So take for instance, so we are in the 4 years Bitcoin cycle, right? Historically, in the past 3 cycles, towards the end of December, essentially marks, essentially marks the end of the cycle, right? So if historically you kind of refer it back, approximately 100 days after the Bitcoin halving event, right? Sorry, not 100 days, 500 days after the Bitcoin halving event, right? Eventually, Bitcoin will gradually drop and go towards a bearish Bitcoin bearish market, right? We call them crypto winter or Bitcoin winter or whatever, right? So if that's the rhythm, right, that means when there's the opportunity for you to take profit, right, that opportunity, to take profit essentially means you can be 3x, 4x, 5x, or in the recent bear market, if you got in at around 16,000, right? And then at the peak of recent Bitcoin all-time high, it was about 126,000 USD. Essentially, that's giving you 10x of your return, right? And you should really be bearish at that time, knowing that the cycle are about to end, right? And constantly be taking profit, right? So on a lot of my video, I always talk about you need to treat Bitcoin like a bank, right? Because how you want to, manage your Bitcoin, you're gonna have a big portion of your Bitcoin, let's say 80%, right? So for my case, 80% of my Bitcoin, it's my HODL bag, right? I don't touch that. I put it into a bank deposit in a hardware wallet somewhere far away, and making sure that that portion of my Bitcoin will always be there, and that's safe for my children, my grandchildren, and so forth, right? But the other 20%, right, that I might want to do some swing trading, or I might want to do buy and sell, right? Essentially what that means, you want to be bearish with that portion of Bitcoin, that 20% worth of Bitcoin, because if you follow the 4-year cycle rhythm, you want to exit when it reaches its all-time high, and you want to re-enter when Bitcoin hits a bearish situation, right? You want to be greedy and start to buy in, right? So that's essentially how, if you want to follow such strategy, you should follow it through, right? Treat Bitcoin where the main HODL bag, that 80% of your HODL bag, right? That should always be bullish, because you and I know that Bitcoin, there are only 21 million of Bitcoin, and we are now at 19.5 or 19.75 million Bitcoin already minted, right? So there aren't a lot of Bitcoin left, right? And that essentially means, because our government, our British government, the US government, any government out there, even China, Malaysia, Hong Kong, anywhere, Europe, right? They rely on printing money to essentially take away wealth from you and I, right? So this is why asset like Bitcoin, a lot of hard asset like your properties that you own, all of these hard asset will only go up, right? So that's why 80% of your Bitcoin, you should always be bullish, because knowing that if the more Bitcoin that you hold, the more properties that you hold, the more gold that you hold, so these are hard assets. Eventually, all of these assets, such asset, can help you to store the value, right? The hard-earned money that you've made now, and store it over a longer period of time, right? However, storing cash doesn't really help you to hedge against the inflation, right? Because if you still hold cash, imagine 10 years, 20 years down the line, bank only be giving you for 2 or 3% in terms of interest, but the cash will lose in value over a longer period of time, right? So that's something to bear in mind, right? And for the other 20% of Bitcoin that you hold, right, follow through that 4-year cycle. We should really be all out in our Bitcoin if we follow through Bitcoin cycle. And I believe a lot of people, a lot of retail investors still follow that through. So that's why people or the investors that have gone through the Bitcoin cycle, right, they know that this is the right time to exit, because the 4-year cycle is coming to an end. So that's why there has been a lot of sell-off for Bitcoin, right? And the same applies for us, right? We can follow it through. We start to sell off. We can, of course, save some in case it goes to the moon, right? So that's the kind of rhythm that we should follow, right? The rhythm that I follow, let's say you own one full Bitcoin, you might be blessed, you earn a lot, you somehow accumulate a one full Bitcoin, and that's 20% of your stash of Bitcoin, right? And your aim is to cash this one full Bitcoin out in this 4-year cycle, right? And knowing that there are still more catalysts that can potentially push Bitcoin up again, right? Maybe what you might want to do is to have 20 or 30% remaining of that one full Bitcoin to capture that uplift for Bitcoin, right? So that would essentially be 0.3 worth of your Bitcoin, right? So for how you should really be doing this, ignore. So how you should really be doing this is, if you plan to exit Bitcoin for approximately 100 days, knowing that that will essentially cover the peak of the Bitcoin cycle. If you kind of spread this out accordingly, essentially you are liquidating approximately 1% of your Bitcoin per day for that 100 days, and then by that time comes 100 days, you'll be totally out, right? However, you also know and take into consideration, like what I did was, I started to cash out Bitcoin at about middle of September, I believe, right? And I adopted a bell curve, right? Knowing that very likely the Bitcoin cycle, it will reach its peak in the middle of that 100 days, right? So at the beginning of September this year, I started to take off approximately, I think it was about 0.5%, as opposed to 1 full percent, right? 0.5% or 0. Gradually building up to about 0.75%, 1%, 1.25%. So you kind of want to have a bell curve of pound cost averaging out of your Bitcoin. and set that up and follow through, right? And what you might want to do is to set some money aside, right? So if you set this up on an Excel formula, right, based on how much you cash out, right, you can formulate all of this. There would be instances when Bitcoin, during the final part of the cycle, it will peak. It will definitely peak, right? As we've seen it, it peaked at around 120,000. It again peaked around 126,000 USD, right? These are every time when it peaked, you want to be slightly aggressive, right? You might want to tell yourself, rather than follow through my DCA out of 1% or 1.25 or 1.75, where you follow through the bell curve, whenever it goes all-time high, I'll take out approximately 5% all in one go or 10% all in one go, right? That is actually helping you to secure your profit, right? We can never ever time the top or never ever time the bottom too, right? So the only ways that we can get through this, it's through pound cost average or dollar cost average strategy. Okay, it worked out for me extremely well for this cycle, right? It worked out for me extremely well for the last cycle, and I felt this is something that you all should know too, right? Where you need to treat Bitcoin, Bitcoin as kind of like in a bull and bear situation, right? So that you can always have some cash ready and get ready to reaccumulate, right? So the next reaccumulation period will definitely be next year, and I somehow felt it will be towards end of next year, right? So make sure you do have cash stashed out somewhere in a high interest saving account, and be prepared for that ride. Okay, it's really important. If you miss it, right, you're gonna miss out on the next cycle again, right? So that's something I told myself, right? This is my third cycle. I missed the first cycle. I didn't know what I was doing. The second cycle, I got in at the top, right? So it wasn't that great. And I at the second cycle, I still somehow managed to buy and accumulated a lot of shit coins, crypto, Ethereum, etc., right? Solana, Cardano, fuck's sake, right? I can't say that. But anyway, do not get into other shitcoin or any crypto for now until you get a good bag of Bitcoin, right? And that's not financial advice, but I want to hint that that's actually a really important financial advice. Because of Bitcoin, it got me much further financially, and I want to make sure that any ordinary middle class people in the UK, when there's such a huge inflation going on around our lives, when there's so much tax being implemented onto us, onto our salary, onto our earnings, onto our property gains, onto essentially everything that we earn, your inheritance tax and so forth, right? Capital gain tax and so forth, right? This is where all of us need Bitcoin, right? I've been through it, I've done it, and I simply felt you guys need to be doing the same thing too, right? So be bearish and bullish on Bitcoin and follow it through. I understand, it's a very bearish situation now, right? And thank goodness I've been taking profit, and I hope you all did the same too. You guys took profit along the way. But this is a cycle that gets repeated every 4 years, right? And the accumulation phase, it's coming up very soon, right? So now I felt cash is king for this particular situation, right? Cash is king. Liquidate. Of course, there could be incidents where Bitcoin may go another all-time high. So this is why I always say have some Bitcoin stash up, so that you still have that HODL back, or you still have a small percentage that you can cash out when Bitcoin peaks again, right? But take into consideration that Bitcoin is an asset that can gives you 3x, 4x, or 5x, or even 10x in the last cycle. If you've gotten in the bottom, essentially it's giving you 10x, right? So don't be greedy, right? Be happy if within 4 years' time you can have at least 3 to 4x of return of your investment, right? No other asset class can give you that, right? Unless you individually tip different stocks and shares, right? So have a little bit faith in Bitcoin. It will eventually do its thing, right? I'm sorry if you are in a very bearish situation where you kind of gotten at a very high Bitcoin price, but give yourself some time, 3-4 years time, 5 years time, you will not be in this bearish situation again ever, right? And knowing that there's only 21 million Bitcoin, we are at 19.75 million right now. There are countries that are buying, institutions are buying, retail adoptions are buying. Bitcoin are actually gotten into traditional finance now. The ETPs getting offered in the UK as well as in Europe, ETF in the US. There will eventually be more buying of Bitcoin once this bearish situation ends, right? And these are phases where you need to be slightly brave and accumulate and be strong. Okay, so that's it for my sharing. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like, hit subscribe if you like my content, and I'll be doing more sharing with you guys soon. Thanks for watching my Compound Live, and I'm Jonathan, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.